A common question about the Soma Cosmos is how the different firmware versions work. That's understandable because the Cosmos deals with the concept of firmware in a pretty unusual way. There are 5 different Cosmos firmwares available to download from Soma's website. Each version has different functionality from the other 4. That means that anytime you switch firmware versions, you're gaining some new functions and losing other functions. There is no one firmware version that gives you immediate access to everything the Cosmos can do all at once. The biggest differences are between the main and rhythmic categories. Switching between any main and any rhythmic firmware is a huge change, whereas the differences within one of those categories are very subtle. We've done several videos detailing the differences between these versions before, and I'll link to those in the description below. To switch firmware versions, the first thing you need is a USB flash drive formatted to a FAT32 file system. All of the firmwares can be downloaded from Soma's site, and to load a new firmware, you need to select that firmware version and put it into the root directory of the flash drive. First, very important detail, you cannot connect a computer to the Cosmos. Doing so can damage the Cosmos. Only a USB flash drive should be connected to the Cosmos USB port. Second very important detail, you can only have one firmware version loaded onto a flash drive at a time. Putting more than one version on the drive at the same time will only confuse things. Third important detail, Soma recommends against using high-capacity flash drives and says that anything from 1 to 32 gigabytes capacity is ideal. Once the flash drive is in the Cosmos USB port, the new firmware version is loaded by turning off the Cosmos and then turning it back on while holding down the record button. Technically, Soma recommends turning the Cosmos off before inserting the flash drive. Personally, I've never encountered any problems by inserting the flash drive while it's running and then turning it off and back on. Your mileage may vary. Loading a new firmware version only takes a few seconds, but you do need to turn the Cosmos off and on again in order to load a new firmware. So you cannot change firmware versions while keeping a loop running. It also means that if you want to switch between different firmware versions quickly, you should have a separate flash drive for each firmware version you want to use to switch between. If you're not in a hurry, you can use one flash drive and replace one version with another while it's connected to your computer. Realistically, I think most people will be very happy with one version each from the main and rhythmic categories. Within those 2 categories, the main thing that changes is whether the drive knob adds distortion or changes the playback speed and pitch. So if you don't use either of those functions, or if you strongly prefer one of them over the other, you can probably just alternate between one main and one rhythmic version and be totally happy. In the worst case scenario, since Soma recommends low capacity drives, getting 5 separate flash drives to have every firmware version available on hand at any given time will probably run you $20 or less. As always, thank you very much for tuning in.